everybody, I'm Mitch Ziegler, physical therapist at Spring Arbor University Physical Therapy. Today what we're going to do, I'm going to explain a technique called strain counterstrain. This is a technique that's been around for a long time, since the 1950s, developed by a gentleman by the name of Larry Jones. It's an osteopathic technique. So let me explain a little bit about the technique. The technique actually involves finding tender points in the body, and these tender points are associated with injuries, the injury that you've had. And so let me explain how that all works. So in the clinic, we found tender points on you, and you're going to be doing releases to those. But what do those tender points really mean? So let me give you an example. So if I'm bending over to pick up something like this, my back will strain and my tissues back there will strain, and then they'll send signals to the spinal cord and to the brain saying, hey, we're in trouble back here. But the spinal cord is getting an incomplete picture, or the brain is getting an incomplete picture of what's happening. It doesn't know what's going on to the front here, because everything is shortened here and the tissue is being strained back here. So what happens then is the nervous system then responds by actually tensing these muscles up, by tensing these hip flexor muscles up enough to give information to the spinal cord or to the nervous system to where all the parts are here in space. So that's all good, but I still hurt my back, right? That's what you're saying. Well, what happens is that your back ends up, the tissues back there end up healing. But what happens in the front here is those muscles never fully lengthen, because when you're in this position, the muscles shorten up, and the nervous system will then hold them and lock them into those positions until they're released. This tissue will heal. And if this doesn't release, we have these tender points, okay? So these tender points indicate that the tissue has contracted and is short, it's knotted. So what we want to do is we want to release that tissue in there. So when we release it, then it'll decrease pressure on the back and all the joints are in the area. So that's strain counterstrain kind of in a nutshell. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go through the 5 different points that we're going to discuss when you do treatment. All right, so now we're going to go over the 5 principles of strain counterstrain. So when you were in the clinic with me, we found these different points in the body, and they were normally located in certain zones. So it's up to you to push on the point, push on the area to find the worst tender point. So that's the principle number 1. Find the worst tender point in the area. Principle number 2 is you need to fold around that tender point. So if it's the hip, for instance, then what you're going to do is you're going to get in a position where your knees come up to the chest. So wherever the tender point is, you fold around that tender point, and then what you're going to do is you're going to check the tender point to make sure it is reduced by a minimum of 50%. What we're shooting for is complete elimination of the tender point, but we want to shoot for a minimum of a 50% reduction in the tender point after you fold around it. Okay, number 3 principle is what we want to do is we want to hold for a minimum of 2 minutes in that position. So after you folded over the tender point and you reduced it a minimum of 50%, you maintain that position and just relax in that position for 2 minutes. You can go up to 5 minutes, and we may have given you, if it's been there for a while, you can extend it up to 5 minutes, but at least do it for 2 minutes, relax, do slow breathing, and just really relax in the position. Okay, number 4 principle of strain counterstrain is that after you've been in the position for a minimum of 2 minutes, you need to slowly move out of that position. Okay, so moving slowly is an important principle. If you move too quickly, that tender point will come right back, the muscles will tense up. If you move slowly, the nervous system will say, okay, everything's still good, and then you get into the normal neutral position. So number 4, return slowly out of the position. And number 5, last principle, is you just want to recheck the tender point to make sure that you have got 50% resolution in the tender point. If you haven't, don't worry, you can go back and look again to see if you can locate another tender point that's worse. and treat it and go through these principles again. If you got a 50% resolution or more, you've done a great job.